Let's talk about that iconic white hood. You know, the one used by assassins in the earlier part of Assassin's Creed franchise. From Altair's legendary first appearance all the way up to pirate Edward Kenway, the white cloak has been a staple of the franchise until it wasn't. It's a super iconic and memorable piece of attire in a video game. But does white really make sense for a sneaky assassin? Maybe it doesn't make that much sense, so this outfit evolves across the franchise for many different reasons. Stress is making my hair fall off, and it's because 98% of you are not subscribed. So if you want me to recover my hair, subscribe! If we go through the game's historical order, the first time we actually see an assassin wearing the iconic white hooded attire is in Assassin's Creed Mirage, which is set in 861 CE with Basim. By this period, the Order of Assassins seems to have already established the white cloak as a uniform, and Basim seems to be the first protagonist in the timeline to start wearing the iconic look and colors of the organization. The choice in color does blend in with his location and time period. Then, we don't see the white attire again until a few hundred years later with Altair in the first Assassin's Creed game, set during the Third Crusade in 1191. This is a game that introduced most of us to the franchise and the first hooded look of the assassins. From Altair onward, the white robes become much more consistent. For about 500 years of Assassin's Creed history, most assassins are still wearing variations of that white attire. At least until 1754, when we get Connor in Assassin's Creed 3, and Connor is the last major character in the historical timeline to wear an almost classic white assassin cloak. Although it shows up in a few other forms here and there, after Connor, the white cloak is gradually changed in favor of a darker look, which becomes more common in later games. So if we go by the historical settings, it kind of tells a story about how the Order's look evolved. At first, the assassins aren't sticking to any specific color or style. They're mostly focused on blending in and adapting to the time period they're in. Still, we can see from early on that from Basim's time, the Assassin Order already has established a uniform of white and red colors that represents their organization. And by Altair's time, the white cloak with the red accents kind of becomes pretty standard. Later on, we see the cloak shift to darker colors, typically black, while still keeping these red accents. Like they shifted to a more covert and stealth-based aesthetic, which I think it makes a lot more sense in the series as it moves into more modern historical settings. But if we switch up and look at the game by release order, we get a slightly different perspective. The white cloak, as we know, was introduced to the players with Altair in the first Assassin's Creed game. Altair's look became instantly iconic with the release of the franchise, establishing a whole white hood and hidden blade concept that we associate with the assassins. And Ubisoft kept this look going in the next few games, specifically through the Ezio trilogy, where we see Ezio wearing his own white cloak in different variations. Then, starting with the fourth game, things start to change because Edward Kenway's cloak still had the classic look and the white color, but it was designed to fit more with the pirate aesthetic and theme, blending the old assassin style with a bit of swashbuckling flair. By the time Assassin's Creed titles like Unity and Syndicate and many others came out, the white cloak was kind of phased out, and each assassin got their own look, usually with a darker color and style, matching their specific time period and location. And then, as Ubisoft began exploring even older time periods like ancient Egypt and Greece, we started seeing outfits that weren't like the classic cloak at all. So when they moved into these more ancient settings, they diverged almost entirely from the iconic look. But why white? Why was this cloak made white? It's an unusual color for an assassin who's supposed to stay hidden. There's actually a pretty decent reason for it in some games. There's this theory that the white cloak was inspired by monks and religious attire, helping assassins blend in with the aesthetic. especially in earlier games. And it's true that Altair's white robes in the first Assassin's Creed help him blend in with the religious figures and some of the Templars of the era during the Third Crusade. The robes align with the colors of the time and with the clothing worn by other groups, so while white might seem a bit strange for an assassin, it makes sense in Altair's setting. He can actually move around a bit more freely without drawing too much attention. Then we get Ezio in Assassin's Creed 2, and that's where the idea starts breaking down a little bit. In Renaissance Italy, Ezio wearing the traditional white cloak, I mean, let's be real, he doesn't exactly blend in with the locals. He sticks out, especially when compared to Altair, who could sort of pass for a monk. Ezio's white robes don't really match the Italian Renaissance setting, so he ends up being a lot more noticeable. You could argue that he still blends in somewhat with the colors used by Templars, but even that's a bit of a stretch. So, while the white cloak worked as an idea in the earlier games, by the time we get to Ezio, it's already becoming more of a symbolic outfit than something practical for a stealth. The white cloak is there more as a nod to the Assassin's Order's identity and maybe value than as a practical piece of attire. And even though this white attire is iconic and closely associated with the franchise, it's actually only worn in a handful of games. As the series goes on, it starts to make more sense for assassins to wear outfits that actually help them blend in to their surroundings. And Ubisoft seems to have recognized this, which is why they started giving characters more realistic outfits in their later titles that were suited to each assassin's environment and era. We all know that in the end, the white cloak has become something of a symbol for the Order's identity and tradition. Even though it's no longer essential for every assassin to wear it, the look is something we instantly recognize, and it's undeniably a big part of what makes Assassin's Creed so iconic. And it's obvious that as we move forward, the games keep exploring new ways to keep the assassins look fresh and relevant to each story, somewhat leaving the classic white cloak attire in our memories to remember the classic games, the best ones in my opinion, and characters like Altair and Ezio.